Up next on Three Guys in a Trek, we cover Season 1, Episode 9 of The Next Generation, Hyde and Q. The Enterprise encounters Q again, and he tempts Riker by endowing him with the powers of the Q. I'm Matt. I have never seen the series at all.
I'm Dennis. I've seen it several times, front to back, back to front.
My name's Mike, and I've seen some of them, but not all of them. This was a new one for me.
So what'd you think, Matt?
Q's back, and it was kind of a mixed bag. Like, some of the stuff he did was funny, it seemed, in character. But then, like, the whole resolution towards the end was sort of more goofy than... Like, I don't know, it was very much a mixed bag for me.
I got you.
Yeah.
With the 10-year aged Wesley Crusher.
Yeah,
that was
Whoever
awesome.
that actor was.
And then I really think they
Baywatch
dubbed...
Wesley Crusher.
Did they
dub his voice?
They dubbed his voice.
It was
yes,
pretty-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to Wesley Crusher in this episode
We always do.
as well. But
Yeah.
but then the whole thing at the end where Q is screaming while he is disappearing, and there were some good moments in the episode, but it seemed like it was just slowly deflated. It wasn't like a good punch
Okay.
Right.
episode. I don't know.
Yeah. To me, I like John Delancey. I think he's one of my favorite actors on the show. Q is one of my favorite characters. I think every time he's on it, I think he acts circles around just about everybody else on the show, with the exception, obviously, of Patrick Stewart. I think he's just he kind of even if he was unknown before, Star Trek, which honestly I don't know what he did before Star Trek. I've never actually looked it up. To me, this he kind of brings another level to the show when he's on it, I think. So.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, there was no monster of the week in this one. But for me, I think I've said this before, the Q episodes are always enjoyable.
Yeah.
I like the situations he puts them in and what he does. I kind of agree with Matt, though. I don't know that this was the best, most complete story of Q, but it was still Q. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So apparently the writer of this episode, he had to go back and watch. This was the first episode, either the writer or the director. This was his first episode, and he had to go back and watch Encounter at Farpoint to kind of get an idea of how to work with Q, John Delancey. And he said that he came up with all these instructions. He studied it. He went back and forth over it, and then John Delancey gets on the set and he's just Q. You don't have to give him instruction. He didn't have to. He stepped into that role like it was a perfect fit, and he just ran with it. And I wonder how much of the ending is the writer writing a story the way that he saw that it should go, and how much of it was John Delancey trying to play into that role as much as he could. We talk a lot about acting, performing to the writing, right? You can only do as well as what's written for you, and doing that as best you can. You get that. We go to Wesley Crusher, where they write him like he's a 9-year-old, and he's obviously 16 at least.
Mm-hmm.
And you act what you're written. So
Yeah, it just... And I liked the idea of Q in this. I think it started off very strong, but I didn't quite... Like, nothing ever seemed really defined in this episode. Mm-hmm. Like, the game didn't really seem defined. The resolution didn't really seem defined. Like, what is exactly is he testing? Which is a big difference from Encounter at Farpoint, right? Even during the game, they're like, those animal things wearing the uniforms, or things. They keep calling them animal things or things or whatever.
Right.
And you're like, you couldn't come up with a name for them? There couldn't be like something else? Like, so, I don't know, like, like just animal things.
Right. Yeah.
It seemed like it was 80% of the way there.
Right.
The whole episode.
Right.
It felt like.
It does seem like there were some gaps, where like they should have tried to explain, okay, why aren't these French or British soldiers? Why aren't they humans? If you're gonna sit them in the time, the French Revolution, why aren't these, like I said, either British or French human soldiers that you're fighting against? Why are they weird looking dog people? Why and why are they using muskets if they're gonna shoot laser beams, kind of laser blasts? I don't know even what the, it was just kind of, I can see that there seemed to be lacking a little bit of
which is a shame though, because the 80% that was there was really good.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it could have really been something special, but it was, I don't know.
Like I said, I enjoyed it.
It was missing some things. I did still enjoy it.
Yeah.
I remember I talked to you about this, I think yesterday. Last week, I think it was, when we were talking about it, you said this was going to be a Riker-centric episode.
Sure.
Now that we've seen it and we're sitting here talking about it, do you still feel like it's a Riker-centric episode?
I know what your perspective is. But yeah, I do. I still think this was. I think Riker was the pivot point in the episode. I think he was the center of it.
But he wasn't the impetus for the solution. Riker was the center and part of the problem towards the end, right?
He was, and that kind of was weird, but it was still, like I said, it was still kind of a.
I feel like he was the center of it up until he realized what power he had.
Yeah.
Then he became the problem.
Yeah.
He wasn't part of the problem. He became the problem. The problem was no longer Q. The problem was the power that Q had given Riker and the way Riker was handling it. And Picard was the one that solved that problem.
He did. He had to basically talk this guy with a world-ending power, the world-ending gun off the ledge and, or off the water tower so that he didn't do something stupid. And he, Picard handled the situation, how you would expect Picard to handle the situation. He was firm completely, but at the same time, he never pressed. He never engaged Riker to the point where I'm antagonizing him to pick a fight. You know what I mean?
He just tried to keep the command the way things were supposed to be. He wasn't trying to
exactly. The line that I loved is the power. Most people may be thinking about the idea that power corrupts, and Riker says, "And absolute power corrupts absolutely." Do you think I haven't thought of that, Jean-Luc?
Yeah.
And Picard says, "And have you noticed that all of a sudden we're on a first name basis?"
Yes. Yeah.
And I loved that.
Yeah.
I thought,
I really like Picard in this episode.
Yeah, and to me, that's when the whole focus of the show flipped back to Picard.
Yeah. Okay.
This was another episode of Picard squaring off against Q. This time, well, for lack of a better term, this time Riker was the pawn that was used.
Right.
Now, like I said, I don't deny that for the majority of the episode, it felt like it was about Riker, but then at the end, it felt like it just came back to Picard versus Q.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, the Q really thought they got to Riker this time because they took this person that he really thinks a lot of and has strong feelings for, his number one commander, and basically gave him all this power and tried to remove him. And let's see what Picard does now. Well, Picard says, nope.
Yeah.
Sorry. And flipped the script on him, and he got taken away.
Yeah.
Q got taken away.
It would have been interesting for this to have been a little bit longer of an
That's
episode.
what I was going to say. It could have been a two-parter.
Give it a two-part and really build into, what are the potential for Riker's powers. Give him more examples. You had the one really heavy-handed example of you should have used the power or else this kid doesn't die.
Yeah.
You know what I
mean?
It
was really quick scene.
Exactly.
It felt really rushed.
It was really quick, but man, It was like a sledgehammer to the
exactly,
face.
but it seemed like that. If that had been stretched out, it would have, like you said, it would have made Riker seem like more of the, not so much as the problem as the victim. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because now he doesn't seem as much the victim in this episode as I think they were really trying to come across. Is
the only time he even seemed like a victim is when everything was going on around him, and you could just see the change wash over his face, and he looks at Picard and says, or something along the lines of, "How was I such an idiot?"
Yeah.
That was the only point that he felt like a victim.
Yeah, I feel like an idiot. Picard,
as you should.
As you should.
Yeah, right. But no, what you're saying about this being a longer episode, I kind of thought about that. Right after the absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And don't you think I've thought of that? Well, haven't you noticed how we're on a first-name basis now? Boom, to be continued. Let's finish this up next week.
Right.
That would have been a great cliffhanger.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you finish it up next week. And at that point, you turn Riker into the victim, and let's see how Riker deals with this problem.
Right.
There's your Riker-centric episode.
You give him more time to wrestle with it
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Yeah.
just turning on a dime
Yeah.
and automatically becoming.
And you could see even at the end
Arrogant.
of the episode when he was sitting there, because he was sitting up on the edge of his chair, kind of leaning in, looking at Riker, or looking at Picard, like, I'm still not sure what just happened here.
Yeah.
Picard
I
looks
was
at him,
thinking
and
the same thing.
Picard looks at him like a father whose son just did something wrong, but you're not going to punish him for it because it's what kids do. Picard just kind of grinned at him and goes, "We got the coordinates set in?"
Yeah.
And Riker's like, yeah, sure. And it goes on.
So you mean you're not gonna yell at me? You're not gonna put me in a brig? You're not
So
gonna...
I don't have to go to my room
Yeah.
now. Okay, good. We're good. It was just,
Yeah.
it was interesting. I think given more time, it really could have been a heavy Riker-centric thing. But even if it wasn't a to-be-continued thing, don't spend so much time on the planet.
Well, even that wasn't.
The green screen.
Yeah.
Playing.
That's what Mike's. I hadn't seen it yet.
There were
Mike.
parts
Yeah.
that there was zoomed in. It's like they're just standing in front of a green screen, guys. Come on, what are you doing?
That's what I said. It's like they put the green screen there thinking we're going to do something cool with this sky.
Yeah.
And then the budget started rolling in. It's like, yep, it's a green sky.
Yep. They had an episode that was filmed before this one, and they said, you know what? We can either do this, or we can put a really cool sky on this next one. Oh, we're going to do this? Okay, you get a green sky. Congratulations.
We can either have the tractor beam effect pulling this ship, or we can just say it's under tractor beam. No, yeah, we're going to have the effect. You have a green sky.
Yeah. Yep.
That's funny. Because that's exactly what I said yesterday.
I mean, it was, almost word for word. That was... but the planet wasn't bad.
No, it wasn't.
It was rushed. So you get to the planet at first, and... All right, so get ahead of ourselves. So Q shows up and he says, we want to give you something that humanity's always wanted, or the best gift humanity's ever gotten, and we want to see
something perfect future or something
right,
like that.
exactly. Right. And Picard's why are we always playing these games? Why don't you just tell us what you want? And he said, games. Oh, okay, that's a great idea. And typically, typical, scene chewing fashion, and he sends everybody down to the planet except for Picard, and
which was great. I mean, you caught that in the previous part of the conversation why he did that, right?
What's that?
Because in the previous conversation with Picard and Q, they kept talking about you took control of my ship, you took my ship, you did this to my ship.
Yeah.
And so when Q took everybody, he left Picard on the ship
Alone.
alone. Picard had his ship.
Yeah.
Now what are you gonna do with it?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I honestly hadn't picked up on that.
Yeah.
Which was a great moment, but again,
It was.
he didn't
but
really do anything with
It
it.
didn't do anything, and it was just kind
It
of
was just
glossed
there.
over, and it just kind of went on.
Because there's a lot of those heavy, that could have really been expanded upon, and honestly, Picard alone on a ship does get expanded upon in another episode. There's another episode where that does happen.
Right.
But the whole idea of being alone on a ship the size of a city, what do you do?
He couldn't get off the bridge.
Not being able to go
The doors
anywhere.
didn't open.
Couldn't even go to his office.
Right.
I mean,
Couldn't. Right.
Couldn't.
So that. But yeah. So there's all kinds of those just moments that really could have been a whole other episode. Q sends everybody down to a planet. We never really find out if it's a planet that actually exists or something that Q just made up out of nowhere. Doesn't really matter. Q decides that he's going to put the crew in the position of being in the French Revolution or something similar. And it's basically the Starfleet crew, or the bridge crew anyway, about 6 of them, against dog people in French
Animal
uniforms.
things.
I don't know. So they have the conversation. They have this weird moment with the drinks, and again, the drinks seems like there should have been something else there. So Q invites Riker to sit down and have refreshments. And Q has a drink, and Riker picks his up, and he says, I was just thinking about a fresh glass of lemonade. And he's got lemonade in his glass. And he said, well, what about my men? And Q says, well, they can have whatever they want. And they all get glasses. So you got to imagine that whatever is in those glasses is what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody actually mentions what's in any of them. But, what would Data... what
drink?
He
what
looked
would
very
Data
unpleased with his drink.
Right. And then Worf, of course, dumps his out and shatters the glass.
Yeah, Worf
and
had some good moments in this
he
episode.
He
too.
did.
Just the
Worf
slow
was
pour
great.
out.
Yes.
that was a great moment.
So, but it was just kind of it seemed like that moment could have been, expanded upon a little bit. So, does Q send the crew back at that point?
No, he sends Tasha Yar into the penalty box
That's
because
what it was. She tries.
says, "You've gone too far."
She tries
because-
to rush him for some reason.
I don't know why she said you've gone too far at that point.
Yeah.
in the episode,
Oh, yeah.
but
It was really
it was a weird line.
Give him
but
a little more time.
Yeah.
He's going to go a lot farther.
yeah,
So she tries to rush him. She goes into the penalty box, which is another curious.
the penalty box, that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I think
How
a lot like what you're talking about, expanding on the drinks.
Mm-hmm.
The threat was that if someone else broke the rules, they would go in the penalty box, and Tasha Yar would be evicted from the penalty box. She wouldn't come back in. She would be evicted into nothingness. She would go away. She would die.
Right.
That is a big threat. You're going to kill one of the main characters, and then it's never mentioned again.
Nope. Yeah, it is.
She just
it
appears
is
on the
because she
ship.
goes to the ship and
She
cries
goes to the
about it.
ship. She cries to Picard, and then Q shows up and lets her out.
So there's a.
There's
you
a
know,
I mean,
Weird-
it
weird
could have
scene
been. It should have been
between-
something where, with Worf's obvious distaste for Q,
mm-hmm.
it should have been okay. He put Tasha Yar there, and now Worf is acting out again,
Right. Somebody
and
needs to.
and then you have the threat of, all right, Worf, you're next for the penalty box. Well, what about Yar? Well, she's just going to be gone.
Right.
And
right.
then there's your threat. And
Right.
It
Like
was
you
just
said-
a missed opportunity.
Like you said,
there's a few of them.
To make that 2-hour episode, that's one of those scenes that could have been, it could have been 3 minutes instead of 30 seconds.
Right.
Mhm.
Apparently, I love reading the IMDb, the trivia stuff on IMDb after I watch these episodes. And one of the things was this is one of about 3 episodes without Troy. She doesn't show up. Apparently, they were thinking about removing her character from the show. She, at this point in the show, she really doesn't serve much purpose on the crew. But in the original script for this episode, I think the lines, Tasha's lines where she cries and she's, I think those were Troy's lines originally, which would have fit her character better than Yar. Yar had kind of a weird reaction to, the threat of death, and I'm still not completely sure. How she knew what was going on, because she had already been put in the penalty box before Q started to explain what was happening.
And then Q accuses Picard of flirting with his crew after he tries to comfort her. It was just really weird.
Yeah. It seemed like there was something there that just...
In our 2-hour episode, that should have been like a 15-minute scene.
Yeah.
Whether they flesh this out,
Yeah.
But there was a lot of questions on that one.
So they go back down, and this is the point that I was getting to, like the weird things seeming rushed. So they go back down to the planet, and it honestly reminded me of Lord of the Rings. You remember there was a scene in Lord of the Rings, and I think it was the Two Towers. You've got Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas are chasing the horde of orcs who've taken Merry and Pippin.
The Urukai.
Yeah, the Urukai. There you go. And so they're hunting them down, and they get to the top of a ridge, and Aragorn looks at Legolas and says, "What do your elf eyes see?" And it's the most goofy. It's like, and I've seen memes about it where Legolas looks at him and he goes, "What do your human ears hear?" It's like, what? We just call them eyes. But they do the same thing here, where they ask they ask Geordi. Obviously he's got the visor, so I guess that lets him see things far off. So
it does now.
It
does whatever they need it to do.
It does what they need it to do. And he's made it over the third ridge, and Data's surprised. The third ridge? It's like, I feel like there's something there, and I missed it.
What is Worf doing?
Why is he gone? It's like, is he running away? Where did he go? It was just more of that rushed, there's more story there that we just didn't get.
Yeah.
Well, and then when he goes out there, all right, there's another thing about that. Mm-hmm. So Worf goes over the third ridge to get a closer look at the enemies.
Sure.
Right? Geordi is sitting on a rock and can see very clearly Worf and all the enemies.
How
So
clearly?
I think he can see him.
I could see freckles on his nose if he had them. Isn't that what the line
That's
was?
what he said, yeah. And it's like, if you can see that far, Worf didn't need to go.
Worf didn't need to go that far.
And then Worf never really comes back.
Right.
And then Riker decides to test his phaser, and Worf comes out of nowhere. Drop your weapon! And it's like, and then somebody says to him, "Wow, that was amazing. You came out of nowhere." And he goes, "Warrior's instinct." And he's all proud. And then Riker's like, "No, I shot that." It's like, yeah, there's your warrior's instinct. You weren't watching your own people. Good job. That was just one of those silly scenes.
Your boss shot a rock and you jumped out of your hiding place. Warrior's instinct. Go, Worf.
Oh, man.
Just a weird.
Again, we always devolve into this, but we all did like this episode.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's the bad part.
There's no way that we can talk about these episodes without critiquing them, though.
Oh, I know. And
it's
it's just, and some of them,
Things that jump out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like there's, when Q first appears, he's this orb
Right.
with 3 cobra heads.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
he calls it, "You can't handle my magnificence." Or something like that. You're even get,
yeah,
like
that's
that.
what it is.
Oh, okay.
That's magnificent.
That's what it is. It wasn't just like a kindergarten craft project that
Right.
someone slapped together.
Uh,
It's your magnificence.
It's magnificent.
All right. Gotcha.
You and me have different definitions of magnificence.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if there was any, probably not, symbolism with
The snakes or
deceiving, and I have no idea.
I
well,
don't
now
know.
you think about it though. He, when the devil first shows up in the Bible, or the serpent,
Mhm.
right? He's offering, the knowledge of good and evil, the apple,
Yeah.
to Eve. This
and you will be as gods.
you'll be as gods, and you get the same. You
That
do
was
get
what he was offering here.
That
You
was
do
what
get
he's
the
offering.
same. That's I hadn't thought of that until you just said that, but that's
Mhm.
that could very easily be.
Yeah.
At whether or not they intended it that way, it's
Yeah.
kind of headcanon makes it that way.
And the weird thing about Q as well and his powers in this episode, they establish it that he can control time and space, like
Right.
perfectly,
Yeah.
whatever you want.
yeah.
And at the end, Picard just rips the hood off and goes, "You're just nothing but a flim-flam man," or something like
Yeah.
that.
You're a flim
Wait a
flam man
minute.
that can control time and space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute.
But you're still a flim flam man.
and then Worf, flim flam.
Yeah. Worf was awesome in this episode. I mean,
Yeah. No, I agree.
all right. So anyway, so they're back on the planet.
Yes, they're back.
Warrior's
on the
instinct,
planet. Warrior's instinct.
and then
Oh yeah, and then so they're trying to figure out what's going on, and then they ask Data a question, and Data turns around and it's Q as Data, and that,
which was fantastic.
if he had done it, I wonder if he had done a little bit more of an impersonation of Data, how much better it could have been. But he really did fantastic. Just the look of it was great. And then Data, showing back up right where he was standing when Q disappears, and he's like, "What?
What happened?"
You find Data very surprised several times in this episode. They really sneak up on poor Data.
But that was about the time that in the episode, though, that's when they were coming up, and they were the dog people were actually starting to attack.
Yes.
And that's when Q was explaining what he had given to Riker.
Yes.
And Riker finally, used his power.
Yeah.
Which has the oddest he just kind of rotates his hand up in front of his face, palm towards his face.
He does the whole
like
John
this.
Cena.
Yeah.
You can't see me. There you go. That's exactly what it is. And everybody goes.
Yep.
And
going through the timeline like we skipped over probably the best scene. To me, the best scene. Before they go back down to the planet, after Picard has talked to Tasha Yar and Q shows up, they go into Picard's ready room. And they do the Shakespeare thing.
yes.
Oh,
And they go back and forth about, the world, the galaxy is a stage, and, Picard corrects him. He's, "Oh, you've read that one. Okay, well, how about this one instead?" And they kind of spar back and forth using Hamlet and both of them together in that scene. That to me made the episode. Even though, like I said, I'll still contend that the episode was Riker centric. To me, that's the best scene. That's the scene that made the episode so entertaining. It's Q constantly being put on the defensive in his own game. His intention was Picard comes in and he's got the collected works of William Shakespeare in his hand. And he's going to use Earth's own literature and history against Picard. And Picard knows it better without the book. Q's using it as a prop. He doesn't need the book. He's, omnipotent, all-knowing, whatever. And Picard is able to kind of turn it back on him. And
what starts the whole thing is when Q looks at him and says, "You don't even have a knowledge of the books on your bookshelf."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then starts quoting from it, and Picard out quotes him.
Yes. And just wonderful.
So that was it. Yeah, that was one of the better scenes. I give you that. But like you said earlier, these were the two best actors on the show at the time.
Yeah.
Locked in a room together, throwing Shakespeare at each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was
really good.
Yeah. It was very entertaining. And then several times you get the end of this scene and the end of the scene that we just backtracked from. So at the end of the scene with Picard and Q in the ready room, they have the quote from Hamlet where God, men are as gods. Basically, you get to the end of it, and Q's like, "Is that how you see yourselves?" And Picard says, "Well, eventually, that's where we'll get. I think we'll get there, and that's what scares you, doesn't it?" And Q kind of. His facial reaction is, "You've caught me." Kind of one of those mustache twirling, curses foiled again kind of moments. But then at the end of the scene where he releases Data, it's the same thing. He offers this power to Riker, and Riker's like, "Join you? I don't even like you." Mm-hmm. But you get to the point where they and I can't remember. This is what I missed from only watching it once this week. There was something Riker said to him that was along the same vein of, that's what you're worried about. You're worried that we don't need these abilities, that we'll get them, we'll get there on our own. And it was fine, have it your way.
I forgot what the word was they used, but basically it was their continual need for growth.
Yeah, there you go.
Because Q's accusation at him was most species get to a certain point and they're content.
Yes.
They stay where they're at. They don't move forward. The humans have not done that. You are continuously moving forward and have a hunger for more knowledge. And what I took from that Q between Q and that discussion between Q and Riker was that what they wanted Riker for was to teach them how to continuously search for more, because as powerful as they are, Q was describing his own race when he said we've gotten to a certain point where we're no longer growing.
Right.
And he wants to learn that from the human race because that's the one thing they lack. And if they had that, they could continue to grow and they could continue to stay ahead. And that's what they were after.
Yeah.
The human compulsion.
Human compulsion.
They want to learn
there
more,
you go.
explore, grow. Yeah.
Right.
Which, in essence, it goes back, if you go back to Genesis again, it's the Dominion mandate. Be fruitful, multiply.
Yeah.
Go forth and subdue the earth. I give you dominion over
Right.
all this stuff. And
Right.
it expanded to the stars in the galaxy, just as Q said, well, in this day and age, he would have said galaxy or universe or whatever,
Right.
instead of just the world.
Right.
All the world's a stage. And so,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, had Moses had any idea of, you know, what the galaxy or what the universe was actually like, you know, Genesis, the creation story may have had completely different wording, but the command and the, like you said, the whole idea of dominion over everything would have still been the same. It may have just been worded, you know, differently.
Right.
And there's even a pattern of expansion anyway, because you go from God's people, Israel, conquering the promised land, to eventually God's people subduing the world for Christ.
Right.
For the promises have expanded, the mandate has expanded. Go forth and teach all nations now.
Right.
Right.
Baptizing, yada
Right.
yada yada, all that stuff. Is now it's not just this land, it's the whole world. It's expanded.
Right.
And so even that's there's always some kind of growth and expansion further up and further in, as C.S. Lewis puts it.
But according to Q, most races in the galaxy reach a certain point where they lose that because they're happy where they are, complacent. I think he might have said
Complacent.
And they just stop. But the humans never have.
Yeah.
And whereas Picard picked up on that in the scene earlier, now Riker's getting the same thing.
Right. Which it surprised me that Riker hit him with that and then immediately takes the powers and immediately uses them and is immediately seduced by them. I say surprises me and then kind of rethink that thought though. Just because, who among us, if given the opportunity to, save our friends, and all of a sudden we were offered, no matter who offered it to us, the ability to completely save the people we love or the people we work with or a little girl who just died, who among us could turn around and say, you know what, I don't think I want that. That's a tough call. That is a hard decision to make.
And if you think about it, every time Riker did use the power in a big way, you could tell by his body language he struggled with it.
Yeah.
He didn't want
that
until
the end.
responsibility.
Until the end when he's doling out wishes.
Yeah.
But that is not in the large scale way that I was talking about.
Right.
I mean, he
gotcha.
he saved the crew and sent them back. And then when they were down there again and he threw up that net, that's when Picard looked at him and said, "You did that."
Yeah.
And then he does another big motion and gets them all away. That's, he struggled with it every time.
Yeah.
Until he finally, and that's what it was when he struggled with it and when he did it and then everything was okay. That's when he was like, well, I can handle this.
Yeah,
I can handle this.
And Data and Dr. Crusher just look so disappointed in him.
They
during that
really
scene.
did, didn't they?
Couldn't you save him?
Yeah.
Save her? I mean, like,
Yeah.
they were
Really made it
they were
hard.
laying it on thick.
Well, and he promised, number one, he promised to not use the powers very quickly without any thought. Picard is like, you've got these abilities. Could you really not use them? If I order you to, and he says, I promise I won't use them. It's no problem. And then when he doesn't use them, he immediately goes back on, Picard, me and you are going to have a talk about this promise. And it's just an instant flip-flop. And I don't know if the catalyst for that, obviously the catalyst for that was the dead girl. But at the same time, I don't know if pride, his idea that, what, I can handle it, I don't need to use these abilities. If that got him,
it was he like I said, he was struggling with it, and so when Picard said that, he took it as an order, and so he still had that loyalty to Picard as his captain at that point. He said, "Okay, I won't use them," but then he knows he has these powers, and they're holding a dead girl in front of him.
Yeah.
Everybody just staring at him like, we know you can do it.
You can fix this.
You can fix this. And his response is, well, I've promised not to. And he felt the disappointment from everybody around him.
Yeah.
It was rushed.
Yeah.
Like we've said about everything in this episode.
Right.
It was rushed.
Right. You've got a whole planet full of dead people, 3 survivors, and the potential to save a little girl. Why wouldn't you do that, Riker?
It's the same rhetoric that's used today in images where they plaster a dead child on it,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
To manipulate people.
But I mean, it made him wrestle with it. He could have saved a life, but he had made that promise to not use the power, and I think that got him.
Yeah,
I think that would be enough to get you. Now, granted, the scene was rushed,
right,
and it needed more time to expand and grow on its own, but I think you can infer from that scene that's exactly what happened. Is he realized he could use these powers and accomplish a lot of good.
You bring up the point of propaganda, and I hadn't thought about this until I said, you got a whole planet full of dead people, and you got 3 survivors, and you could have had a 4th. With Riker's powers, he could have saved everybody. There were 504 people on the planet. So now you've got 3 survivors, a dead girl. That's 500 other dead people there that Riker could have saved that you don't hear about. Nobody says, well, you've got these powers, not just the girl, save everybody. But it's just the girl, and it's again.
That was the focal point.
It's that idea.
That was the heartstring they chose to pull.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like
one life is a tragedy. 1,000 lives is a
footnote, right?
Footnote,
it's a.
But while we're in the scene, can we go back and mention the super strength that Data has?
I love
that was just so fantastic.
I love Data's super strength.
He's just picking up these rocks
and just chucking them.
And he's
making
not
them
even
look like the styrofoam they really are.
Yeah, and he's not even looking.
No.
So in canon of the universe, if one of these things goes astray and hits Yar, she's dead now.
Yep. Or hits one of the 3 survivors. Now he's killed some.
Now we've got 2 survivors.
Yeah, and then the opening the doors, Riker comes up and he goes to pull on the door, and I honestly expected him to at that point wrestle with the idea of, do I use my powers to open the door? And he goes immediately and he points to Data and has Data come over there and open it for him, and Data being the big dog that he is, he pushes it aside and he pushes the other one aside and lets everybody through. But I expected that to be another one of those, how big a problem is too small a problem, and how big a problem is big enough for me to consider using, these powers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the ultimate lesson when we get to the end of this? Is it... Because you almost get a Bruce Almighty vibe to it.
Sure.
It feels like Bruce Almighty got a lot of ideas from this episode. Because the same things happen to him. He's trying to help someone and really
doesn't want.
He's granted the powers of a god,
and
he doesn't, and he just screws things up.
Yeah,
by giving people what they want.
Right, what they seem to want.
It gives you. It puts a whole new perspective on the idea of absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because what he was doing, it wasn't corrupt. It wasn't evil. It wasn't world-destroying. He knew what these people who were his friends, he knew what they wanted most in life. So he was going to give it to them.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. until you do it, and then the people get it, and they're like, yeah, this isn't right.
This just feels weird.
This just feels weird. Yeah, and
It's aberration. Yeah.
it's not natural.
Right. It's another.
Now we're back to Crusher, who's now 26, huge, tan. He just came off Baywatch.
Right, blonde.
Yeah. And still has that high-pitched squeaky Wesley Crusher voice.
So they grew his body and skipped puberty altogether.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, talk about Bruce Almighty, and he answers the emails, right? And he just says, approved or whatever, and he answers everybody's prayers as yes. Sends out the mass email, and you see how wrong that goes. And then you get the same, and on a much smaller scale here. He's trying to answer, everybody's prayers yes, and it makes you think to yourself too. So what is it that I want most of all? And if it was rushed, if it was given to me in an instant, would I appreciate it as much as as when I actually had to work to get there or go through whatever it's going to take to get there? Mm-hmm. That gift that's given to you immediately, that immediate satisfaction, is that as gratifying as the work you put into it? Which Wesley, he comes up to him and says, this isn't right. This isn't.
I want to get there on my own.
I want to get there on my own.
Yeah, that's the biggest example because it's super weird. It's like just because he's aged 10 years doesn't make him a man automatically, right?
Right.
You also give him the wisdom and experience. Like,
right.
Part of, the journey is intrinsic part of the destination of
Absolutely.
that type of thing. So, that was the weirdest one.
Yeah.
Well, and when you're talking about the ones that are the weirdest, I thought the most realistic one was Geordi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one was the most realistic one because he's fixed his eyes. Geordi stood up. He looked out the window into space. He turned around and looked at Tasha, told her how beautiful she was. Beautiful as he imagined.
Right.
Yep. Or more.
And more beautiful.
More beautiful than he'd imagined.
And then slick talker.
Yeah.
And then, and then he turned around and sat down and said, but I don't want it. Take it back.
Take it back.
It's not real. I don't want it. And he kind of repeated some of the same things that that Data had said.
Yeah.
Taking one falsehood and replacing it with another doesn't make it true.
Right. Yeah.
Where Data is still, even if he had made him human, Data still would have been a created.
Right. He still wouldn't have been
being.
really
He's
human.
not. Yeah,
he
he's
was
not
an
his
android
that was
somebody
turned
made
human.
him human.
He was
different.
Pinocchio.
Right.
He was
Right.
Pinocchio.
Absolutely.
And I thought Data's answer was very. I don't know. It was impressive. It's what you would expect from the most knowledgeable one on the bridge. But I thought Geordi's was the most realistic. He got it. He used it. He really appreciated it.
Yeah, he did.
He loved it. And then said, but this isn't right. I want to go back to the way I was.
That was the most normal because all he was doing was making something work that was broken.
Right.
He wasn't trying to be
what was
abnormal about it.
What was it he said? He didn't want it knowing that he would probably owe somebody he couldn't pay back, or
he didn't want to say thanks.
He didn't want to have to say. He didn't like the idea of saying thanks to the person he had to thank, or he didn't like
the idea of feeling gratitude
of
whoever he had to feel gratitude toward.
Something like that. But yeah, I mean,
here it is.
But I think that was the. I think that. Well, I mean, it had to be because you got the line.
Yeah, here's the line. It says the price is a little too high for me, and I don't like who I'd have to thank.
Yeah.
So he takes his visor back and he sits down.
And I think that's the moment. That's the I've been such an idiot moment for Riker.
Oh yeah.
Because he's the only one at this point who hasn't complained, because I don't think Crusher's complained at this point.
Mm-mm.
He's still standing over there. Data has told him no, and Geordi has said thanks but no thanks.
Right.
And has he done Worf at this point?
Because
because
his next
baby.
wife, and then
because Geordi looks at him and goes, Worf, is this what you think sex is? And Worf goes, this is sex.
This is sex. It's like, I have no place for it.
No place for it in my life.
Well,
it's like, what in the world is going on
I'll
here?
tell you what, though. Here, I actually liked this moment with Worf.
Oh, I did too.
So with Worf, you find something else that they've not talked about yet. At least I don't think they've mentioned the fact that he wasn't raised by his own people. You know, he wasn't raised by Klingons, and he actually mentions that. He's like,
This is the closest they've come to it, because they didn't actually say it, but they said he's disconnected from his own people.
He's disconnected from his
Mhm.
own people, and so this woman has no meaning for him. He knows what, you know, obviously Klingon sex is supposed to be like, and he knows that that's what this is, and you know, just like Geordi, you know, he takes a minute to relish it, right? He starts to initiate, which you get into farther down the line, and you find out that that's just the way Klingon sex is just violent. They just beat each other up.
The weird
and
part
bite each
about
other
it is,
and
the
weird
weird
stuff.
part about it is though is how it started. It started with her trying to attack Yar,
Yes.
and he was defending Yar.
Yeah.
And from him defending Yar, it turned into Klingon sex
Yes.
in front of a 25-year-old,
Man
9-year-old Wesley Crusher, who has a really skewed idea of what
Yeah.
sex is at this point.
Oh man. Can you imagine that conversation later
Oh,
on?
wow. Oh man.
Mom? Well, and honestly, I know that Jack Crusher, Beverly's, you know, dead husband and Wesley's father, I know that he makes an appearance on the show. And for a split second, I thought that when Riker was going to give Wesley what he wanted, that's what it was, that it was going to be his dad.
His dad.
Which
That would make more sense to me.
it
It wouldn't have been near as abnormal
seems
as
like it.
yeah.
I don't know, maybe
Resurrection makes more sense than whatever he did to Wesley.
Well, I don't know. For Wesley's character so far, the way he's been played, this would be his biggest wish.
right.
But he's never paid attention to because he's just the kid.
I mean, he did have the line.
but
you
he,
know.
but he wants
incredible-
respect, right? Not just
He's the incredibly smart kid. And when you're the incredibly smart kid, I mean, y'all got to tell me I've never been that. And nobody's respecting you and your opinions. What's the one thing that you think it is? Well, if I was older, they would listen to me because I would be an adult. They're not listening to me because I'm not an adult.
Could be.
And I really think it was that the way they've written the Wesley Crusher character so far,
Yeah, that made the most
that
sense.
particular Wesley Crusher wanted to be an adult so that he'd be respected and listened to, although he still had an awfully squeaky voice.
Yeah, but even
See,
Beverly,
I thought the husband was going to come from Beverly.
yeah, and see, because she started to protest as soon as Riker started looking their way. She's like, "No, please, no, don't." And it's like, what?
yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I thought
And
it was
that-
going to be.
Right. I was thinking, okay, I knew that it happened. I know that it happens eventually, one way or another. Honestly, the episodes tend to run together on the ones that, you know, don't have that plot line that's you know, super memorable.
The iconic. Yeah.
But it. So I honestly, I there for a second, I really thought that he was going to show up.
Yeah, I did too, because when he started looking at her and she started protesting, like she was about to break down and start crying
Right.
with how upset she was protesting, I really thought he was going to look at her, snap his fingers, and here comes her husband.
Right.
But then he said no, because who knows Wesley better than me? And then it's like, oh, you're going that way. Who knows him better than you? Clearly not his mother. What?
How do
What's
you
going
know?
on?
Yeah.
What happened? Okay, here we go.
It's like in just a few minutes before he calls this meeting, you know, and Picard makes sure to tell him, no, I've allowed you to use my bridge for this meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't step out of line, boy. I've allowed this. And, you know, so Crushers come in and Riker's like, this isn't for you, Wesley. And you know, he has to convince him,
Yeah.
you know, the no, I belong here. And and then there you got that immediate, who knows Wesley better than I do? It's like, well, you just wanted to throw him out. What do you?
Yeah. It goes back to that being rushed
Yeah.
again, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of it's. So I'm piecing some things together in base of what we talked about, going to the serpent, to the humans as God.
Sure.
And being granted these godlike powers.
Mhm.
And you keep getting these Genesis connotations of the serpent and the forbidden fruit and all this other
Mhm.
stuff.
Sure.
And probably, maybe they were. We'll have to look it up. Maybe they were trying to go for the same message, because the sin in the garden of taking the forbidden fruit was partly pride and grabbing something that they weren't ready for yet.
Right.
It had been forbidden them, but God, it wasn't a for all time forbidden thing, right? Because God gives Solomon the fruit of the tree in knowledge of good and evil right later.
Sure.
So all they had to do was ask God for it, and he would have given it to them. But they had to come to the realization that they needed to ask God for it.
Okay.
Before, if they had gotten this wisdom beforehand, well, we see what happens. He's like, well, they're like us now,
right?
And they know good and evil. They do all this. They have this wisdom and cunning, but they weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
And they have ingratitude. They've fallen, and so now they do all this evil stuff with it.
Right.
They just they're children with a dangerous toy.
Right.
Right. And so it seems like this is the same.
That's kind of what Riker is there at the end. He's a child, in regards to Q. You know, he's a new Q with these powers that he doesn't understand.
Which is weird beyond him. Which is weird when you look at it like that, because Q is standing over there egging him on to do.
Oh yeah, well,
to do what he's doing.
Now Q has an ulterior motive though, because Q it's either Q leaves them alone from now on, or the other side of the coin is if Riker does take it, Riker leaves with him and they stop, right? They go no farther, or
humanity
stops. They don't continue, and that's what Q wanted in the first episode, and that's what he wants in this episode.
Right?
Y'all stop going forward. You guys are progressing too quickly. Stop.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, he's got that ulterior motive. So he is kind of the same way that, I guess not the same way. I guess it's the opposite side of the coin. He's egging Riker on. Picard is allowing Riker to come to the conclusion on his own. Picard lets it play out. Picard could have easily stood up and argued, ask these people what they want, offer to give it to them, and see what they say. He could have made that argument and gone the route that Q does. Egg him on, try to convince. And instead, Picard lets it play out. Like I said, Q's got that motivation behind him that he's not willing to let it play out because he knows how it will play out. He wants it to go faster. He wants it. He wants it to be.
His ultimate goal was to leave with Riker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what he wanted, and for them to be as omnipotent and all powerful as they're supposed to be, this collective Q.
Yeah.
What they said in one of the first episodes, and then what we've already talked about with the scene with Q and Picard, and then later Q and Riker. As all powerful as they're supposed to be, they really don't know what to do with the human race.
Right.
Because as far as they knew from the first episode, they're nothing but savages.
Yeah.
They go to a place, they kill everything there, then they go to the next place and kill everything there. That's all they are.
Yeah.
They're just warmongering savages. And as he's dealing with them, the end of the first episode, they get the better of him because they don't succumb to that. Well, instead of just leaving them alone, it intrigued them. So now now the Q is studying the human race. And so now they want this one to come with them. And like you said, they want the human race to stop where they are, but they want to take Riker so they can learn about the human compulsion.
Right.
And so that they can get it and continue on and become even more powerful.
Yeah.
And it's just they really don't know how. They've never come across anything like the human race.
Right. Right.
And they just don't know what to do with it.
And then you get to the Wicked Witch of the West scene, which this will be, 4 episodes in a row where we've done Wizard of Oz. And it's basically throwing water on the witch. No, I'm melting. And it's John Delancey, just acting the crap out of it as best he can.
No, yeah.
But it's, the booming, the ship shakes, and all of a sudden, he's being pulled out of the ship because he's failed at his job. And you realize, I think that's the first time you realize that he may not necessarily be in charge. he comes across when he shows up on the ship the first time. He wears the captain's uniform, right? He's dressed as a captain. He's a man in charge. This time when he shows up on the ship, he's an admiral, right? He's in charge, or he's what was he on the planet? The
Marshal.
French marshal,
Field marshal.
and that outranks an admiral. So he's this man who's wanting to put forth this idea that he's in control, he's in charge, he's running things. And then at the end of the episode, you find out that maybe there's somebody else pulling his strings. He's not quite that guy. And they basically yank him out of there.
Well, that goes back to a lot of the Star Wars storylines too.
Mm-hmm.
The big bad is Vader until you realize there's somebody pulling Vader's strings.
Right.
It's that same kind of thing. He is the scariest thing out there. But there is one guy that is more powerful than him, and that's who Vader works for.
Right.
And I get the same idea, like you said, with Q, that, you really get that at the end when he gets pulled away, because he's begging for more time. Let me try one more thing. Don't put me back. Let me try one more thing. And it's just, you don't hear an answer. He leaves.
Yep.
And, yeah. You get the idea that he's the part of a superior race.
Mm-hmm.
So when he shows up, he automatically takes charge of the inferior race, as happens in a lot of these movies and stories. But then you find out that, yes, he is part of a superior race, but he's the low end of that superior race.
Right. He's not high man on that totem pole.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's all different explanations as you go forward about the Q continuum. Some episodes imply that Qs are individuals. And even this one does to an extent. It implies that there's an individuality to each Q. Others, you called it the collective earlier, and others. There are other episodes where they kind of imply that Q is the continuum, and he's Q. Q is Q. It's kind of there was a comic book series called Secret Wars, where you've got this character who his name was the Beyonder, right? And he's from this different dimension, but he is everything in that dimension. Once he crosses into our dimension, there's nothing left in that other space, because he was everything that was there. And he's kind of got the same abilities really as Q. He's all powerful, not quite all-knowing, same thing like with Q. There's obviously some blind spots there, and not, omnipresent, I guess the way that you would, the three ways you define God, omnipotent, all-knowing, and omnipresent. They've got the power. And so there are episodes where they kind of intimate that that Q is the continuum. But like I said, it builds on itself. That's kind of if you just went through and watched all of the Q episodes from Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, you kind of pick up this. There's a pretty good story of what's going on in the continuum, and people, like you said, some of them are stagnant. They feel like they're not making any progress. And there's two camps, basically, where you've got a camp that wants to make more progress, and you've got another camp that just wants to stop everybody where they're at, and nobody can go any farther than the Q has, and that sort of thing. So there's this whole other story that you can trace along about 10 or 11 episodes, over the course of 3 full series of Star Trek.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
there's a sci-fi book over there on the shelf called Lord of Light, and it's essentially about these people who have, through superior technology, have essentially set themselves up as the Hindu god pantheon.
Okay.
The Hindu pantheon as gods. And throughout the book, you learn that they crash landed on this planet and whatever. Things have progressed. Through technology, they've made themselves mortal, and there's these other humans. And there's one faction among the Godhead, the Pantheon, called accelerationists, that want to start giving them technology.
Okay.
and there's everyone else who's let's just keep them down. Let's just sit back
And
they're not
reap it. Yeah.
and reap the rewards of being Hindu gods in
Right.
this new world, right?
Right.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. I said I wish I knew the number of Q episodes. I would bet it's more. There's probably more than a dozen more, where he shows up over the next 7 seasons or however many it goes. So I think we hit this one from all sides.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the Wesley's move on
Wesley's
the battlefield, like when Worf dies?
Oh,
Worf
yeah.
just runs straight in there.
You know what?
And starts attacking.
Yeah, you're right.
And Wesley screams out and just runs into the battlefield, turns his back to to all the bayonets.
He's trying to
Just
save his
starts
friend.
trying to save his friend. Like, well,
And then he gets stabbed in the back for his trouble.
yeah,
And he grabs
What
that
is-
blade with both hands.
yeah. That was
Yeah.
it was a very strange scene.
Yeah, it was brutal. But you know, again, it's not one of those, Wesley moments. You know what I mean?
That
To
was-
me, this is
You get the feeling that was his first real.
right. He's
experience
never
in battle.
seen battle.
He's never
Yeah.
seen this before.
Right, and even if he has, he's thinking battle's going to be phasers and torpedoes from a starship. He's not picturing battle from on the ground with knives. You know what I mean? That's not what I'm sure is not what he's thinking. And then to see his friend get stabbed, and then him to see all of a sudden a blade sprout from his belly, it's like, man, he did just grow up 10 years that episode.
Yeah. The one part that made me laugh is when they first beamed or whatever down on the planet, and they're just looking around. They can't see anything. Yara suddenly goes, "Sir, look!" And there's this huge tent right there,
Like
It's
right next to him.
right next to him. It's like, oh, there it is, right? That cracked me up.
Yeah, it's that whole
Yeah.
play acting thing. It's the world's a stage, and they're acting for it. I did like there was again in the scene where they're going back and forth about over Shakespeare, and Picard, Q makes the statement, about this is just some idiot's game or some idiot's idea. I can't remember what the line was, but then Picard basically takes it and turns it back around on him, basically implying that oh well, it's the idiot's game, and you're the idiot.
It's your game.
It's your game. Yeah, there were a couple of good zingers where Picard really got the better of people.
Yeah. The beginning, when Q shows up, is it Picard who says there are people suffering and dying that we're going to save? And Q's like, humans are always suffering and dying. So it's true.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. There's always going to be someone suffering and dying. It's our lot in life. But
Made to suffer. And C-3PO.
it's our lot in life.
Yeah.
So, what do we rate this episode?
Who wants to go first?
Out of a 7, this one was a good episode. I enjoyed it. 4.5. It could go as far as 5. I think I've talked myself out of that just because we just like we do, we critique these things to death and beat the snot out of them.
Yeah.
And some of the rush, it's a little more obvious now that I know that 2 other people see how much some of these things were rushed and could have been paced better. Kind of makes me back off of my 5, but this is one of the better ones that I've seen so far in the first season. I enjoyed it, and I love Q. Q's, like I said earlier, he's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
4.5.
I was going to say the exact same thing. 4.5.
Mike, come on, hit us with the.
No, I'm actually a lot closer to the 5.
Oh, okay.
I mean, even after all that, because it is, like the number you threw out earlier, I'm going to go back to that. It is 80% of a fantastic episode.
Right.
It was missing 20%, and most of that 20% is all in pacing.
Yes.
But I'm and I don't know why I'm doing this with this episode. I haven't really done it with any of the other ones, but I'm comparing this episode to the episodes we've seen so far.
Okay.
I think this is one of the best episodes we've seen so far.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree.
And so I have to rate it higher than I've rated any of the others.
Sure.
So that immediately puts it at a 5. I mean, it's not a monster of the week, but it's Q. I love Q.
Yeah.
Q's great. And I don't know, it's 20% away from being a 6.5.
Okay.
I mean,
The concepts were there.
The concepts
really
were there. It just
something great.
But at the same time, because they got it all the way up to that 80% or 75, whatever you want to call it, it shows progress. They are getting their footing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This thing is close to becoming the series that everybody respected it for.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that it's growing fast enough to get there this season, because from what I remember, it doesn't.
I'll give you the little slow head shake over here.
It doesn't hit that this season, but this one more than any of the other episodes shows potential.
Oh yeah,
shows the most potential, I think. And I mean, a lot of it, like you said, it goes back to that one little 2-minute scene.
Mm-hmm.
Picard and Q in a room doing Shakespeare.
Yeah.
That should not work in Star Trek, but it did.
It does.
I mean, it was.
It does. He's a British stage.
That's what he did.
Yeah,
what he
did.
When he started
Shakespeare,
when he started delivering Shakespeare lines, lines from Hamlet, it was just. I mean, I got that hair on the back of my neck stand because it's like this is what he's known for. Right. At this point in his life, at this point in the series, anyway, that is what he's known for.
Oh yeah,
he was a stage man.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing this little Star Trek show that nobody expects to go more than 2 seasons anyway, and then he's going to go back to stage.
Right.
And, obviously we know what happened, but, I mean, it was the most natural he's looked.
Yeah.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I really enjoyed this episode.
It was good.
Yeah.
I am always a little bit off from you all, one way or the other, though.
I think really, here's the thing. People are going to get to the end of this, and they're going to go, but that doesn't sound anything like what y'all talked about at the beginning. Maybe we need to rate these first, and then talk ourselves down.
Maybe we should do that. Let's go. The first thing we do
is we rate it.
We rate
it before we critique.
Okay. Then we talk about it. Then Matt jots them down in his little notebook, and then we talk about it and say, okay, before we started talking, you gave this a 6. What do you say now?
How did they go? Now that I've just drilled holes all in your pretty little Star Trek, now what do you think?
Yeah. But that's the thing about Star Trek, and even the plot holes and the issues that people have with the prequels and the new stuff in Star Wars. The reason it works is because that's just how the universe is set up.
Yeah.
That franchise lives in.
Yeah.
Star Trek has a lot of holes in it.
Oh yeah.
Star Wars has a lot of holes in it. It has a lot of problems, but you can't even say that we love it despite that. It's like it almost gets to the point, especially probably more with Star Wars and Star Trek. You love it because of that.
Yeah.
It's
the flaws.
The flaws are what makes it so great. Because there are flaws, but it's still one of the best science fiction operas ever.
Right.
You
can't appreciate how good it is without some of the flaws behind it.
Right.
Well, it's like the growth we were talking about. You can't just be granted the powers of Q and grow someone 10 years. You gotta be a journey.
You gotta work there.
You gotta work.
The
there.
reason
the only reason I haven't seen them, but the only reason we get some of the best episodes later is because they stumbled their way through these early ones.
Right.
So.
And
the only reason we get the
pacing.
Borg Collective is because of these early episodes with Q.
There you go.
I mean, because the Borg are basically the evil Q.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong; they're more than that, but that's just a basic,
Well, is the Q more like chaotic neutral or something, and then the Borg are
lawful evil.
Lawful evil.
Lawful evil. You will succumb. You will be part of us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're lawful
absolute
evil.
order.
Absolute order.
All right, now you've really got me wanting to put a Star Trek person or race on every single square of the 9. You know, really, gosh, like Data for, I guess, lawful neutral. Because Data's always going to be, he's got that morality behind him, but he's going to be moral regardless of is it the quote unquote right thing because it's of who I'm with, or is it the right thing because it's the right thing?
It's the right thing because that's what he's been programmed to think is the right thing.
Okay, I got you.
That's where I would see Data as the lawful neutral one.
Right.
But
just like all of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Man.
Look at the time.
Let's go to part 2.
Bomb. Throw a grenade in there. All right.
I'm glad he said that, though, because we'd have been here for another hour going over that. That grid, man.
What do we title this? Do we have any alternate titles? Riker Almighty.
Riker
Almighty. Yeah.
You shall be as gods.
Alas, poor Wesley. I knew him well.
Big. Big light. Big aborted.
Star Trek Next Generation, Baywatch edition. It's not quite.
Didn't he look like somebody straight off of Baywatch, though?
Right. With the
that's right.
Skimpy.
That's
running.
True.
Everyone
That's
running.
true.
And skipping
Everybody
outfits.
running.
That's true.
That's where Baywatch stole the idea from.
All right. Well, next episode, we meet Deanna's mom. So Troy comes back. She makes a comeback. Loxana Troy. When she comes on, I would ask both of you, and this just be on the honor system. When she talks, all right, don't look up who she is. Don't look up what roles she's played. But she's had another role on Star Trek. All right, the lady who plays Troy's mom, and see if you can pick up what that is. And then obviously after the show, go back and look and see what the role was. She was in the pilot episode of the original series, Star Trek: The Original Series, the pilot episode. She was, I don't know, there was a Christopher Pike, and they go back in the original series, and they kind of force the pilot episode as a Star Trek: The Original Series episode. It was an unaired pilot that they kind of used as a filler episode throughout, and she is basically the first officer to Christopher Pike, and she plays that character. So she's been around. She's Gene Roddenberry's wife is who this lady is. But like I said, honor system, obviously. See if you can pick out who she is when she comes on.
Okay.
All right.
Well, this was our 10th episode.
All right.
So we made it that far.
Awesome.
Celebration time.
Pretty good.
Yeah, not too bad.
Well, until next time.